Inserting and customizing slicers. When we have a pivot table created, in the Analyze tab, you'll see an option that allows you to insert a slicer. A slicer is just another way of applying a filter. The visual effect of applying a filter through a slicer is more appealing to those that are looking at the screen and easier for people to apply who don't necessarily know how to use Excel as well as you. It will give us buttons to click on, and then when we click the button, it will apply a filter to our pivot table. So first, we need the buttons that we can click on. In order to get a bit of space here, I'm going to go and insert some extra rows above this pivot table. Now I need to click into the pivot table and go to the Analyze tab to find the option Insert Slicer. Clicking on this, I'll see the names of all of the different fields coming from my data source. I need to turn on the slicer or slicers that I would like to filter under. So let's say I'd like to filter under product, so I turn on a tick, and I'm also going to filter under salesperson, so I'll turn on a tick there as well. You can turn on as many slicers as you want. So now when I press the OK button, I will see those two slicers appearing on screen. So one of them is the product slicer and the other is the salesperson slicer. Before we start using them to apply filters, let's look at customizing the slicers. Here I have the product slicer and it has 3 buttons. Currently the buttons are one under the other. If I'd like to move this up here, it might be nicer that the buttons were side by side instead of all down one column. When you click inside of a slicer, you will see up at the top here Slicer Tools and the options that go with them. If I click here on Options, I'll notice the column is 1, meaning each of the buttons are one under the other in one column. I want to change it so that the buttons are side by side, so I need to go in and change the number of columns to 3 because I have 3 buttons. Now I'm going to reduce the size of the slicer by dragging it up, and I'm going to increase its width by dragging it to the right. So now I can see the 3 buttons that build this slicer. Also in the slicer options, you can go in and change the color of the slicer tool as well. Clicking on the drop down here will just give you more options as well. So let's do the same now with the salesperson. So this time I can see that I have 4 salespeople. So clicking on the salesperson slicer, I'll see the slicer tool options that go with that slicer. Currently, all of the buttons are in one column. I'm going to change this to 4. Then I'm going to drag the slicer across and drag it up. So now again, I might go in and change its color. Now we have inserted and customized our slicers. Let's have a look at using the slicers now to apply a filter to the table below. So if I choose smartphone from the product slicer, the pivot table changes to only show me the data for the smartphone. Clicking on the X here will clear that filter. If I go to salesperson and choose a salesperson, again it's filtering the pivot table to only show the values for that one salesperson. I might want to show the values for that salesperson for smartphones only, and again I can now do a double filter from the salesperson and the product. To clear these filters again, simply go to the red X for each one until no filter is being applied. To the left of the clear filter button, we also have the multiple selections option. Clicking this to turn it on, we notice that currently all 3 are turned on, and if I turn off smartphone, it now leaves desktop and tablet turned on. So it allows you to do a filter for more than one item at a time. Turn that off again And then when you clear the filter, the next time you click, you're actually selecting that as the item to filter under. So if I'd like to filter under two salespeople, for example, Lynch and Graham, I would turn on the multi-select and then turn off Shirley and Martin, and I'm left behind with just the two salespeople that I want to see. If you'd like to delete a slicer, simply make sure you clear the filter from that slicer first, and then select the slicer once and press the delete button on your keyboard. There are further slicer settings if you go into the Options tab, and they're located at the very beginning of the Options tab. Here we'll see Slicer Settings, and I can see we have a name for this slicer, and this is the caption that it's displaying. So this is the word product up here. You could change this, for example, to choose a product. And then when you press OK, that's the caption that you'll see up above. We can also take off the choose a product heading completely by going back into slicer settings and then turning off the display header and pressing OK. This does mean you can squeeze the slicer up to make it smaller. However, you do miss the clear filter and the select multiple options when you do that. You can right click to do what it is you want to do. So here you can see multi-select, and also you'll see the option to clear the filter as well. So although the options are there, they're just not there as buttons anymore in the header when you choose to turn that off. So going back into slicer settings, you can turn back on the display header, and there are some other items at the bottom here which you can turn on or off depending on your data. So when you press the OK button, all of those options will then appear.